Do you know what the president means when he says that the United States Navy is now going to be blockading the Strait of Hormuz that we are trying to open? In that tweet today, the president also said they might not have.
Well, I think,
because he said no.
I think you'll have to ask the president.
But
it's his
that's
tweet.
The point that Congress has not been briefed on that. As a member on Oversight and Armed Services, do you feel like this has actually been adequately explained to you? Because the American public does not.
The president just tweeted this morning, so you'll have to ask the president.
A sitting member of the Armed Services Committee, the guy whose entire job is congressional oversight, just told a journalist to go ask the president what the president's own military strategy means. Not a staffer, not a press secretary, a congressman, on camera, during an active conflict. Margaret Brennan handed Mike Turner every opportunity to explain Trump's Iran strategy, the Hormuz blockade, the ceasefire, the contradictory tweets, and he had nothing. Literally nothing. Just recycled talking points about nuclear weapons and a visible panic every time she pushed past the surface. And here is what makes this moment bigger than just one bad interview. Congress has been in session 11 days since this conflict started. 11 days. And the Armed Services Committee member cannot tell you whether the Navy mined the Strait of Hormuz this morning. Cannot tell you what the blockade tweet means. Cannot tell you what the strategy is. That is not incompetence. That is what happens when loyalty replaces oversight. And nobody is supposed to notice. Subscribe to Miller's mandate if you think someone should notice. I am Silas Miller, and we do not let moments like this slide. Now, let's get into it.
No conflict ever polls well. I mean, when there's a conflict occurring, no one says it's being handled well because you have to go through the conflict. The president has articulated, I think, very well, that this is about ensuring that Iran does not become a nuclear state. And no one is willing to trade lower gas prices for Iran becoming a nuclear state. And when Vice President Vance stood at the podium and said that the negotiations had broken off because Iran was not willing to declare that they would not become a nuclear state. That should have sent a chill both through Europe and around the world. And I think, for everyone, because that truly is what this is about. That puts away what Senator Warner was trying to dismissively say, that this was not an imminent threat, and what everyone else has been saying in Europe and around the world.
Well, the president says it's an ambition.
But that this is an immediate. The IAEA, Grossi, the director, had said they were weeks away from having enough material to have.
He said there was no evidence that they were pursuing a nuclear weapon.
They were weeks away, and now you have it. No longer can people say that they did not have the ambition. Here they are, all the way at the table. They have been in this massive conflict, and they're unwilling to say they're not going to pursue. They're unwilling to pursue a nuclear weapon.
Preventing that. However, the negotiation itself is proof of the fact that militarily you cannot achieve destruction of nuclear ambition, is it not?
No, it's not, because they're still ongoing. And the president has said—
What's ongoing?
This conflict, this act, the negotiations.
But the president said the war's won.
This is not over. And as it's not over, Iran is going to have to come to the realization, the JCPOA, the original enrichment deal that Obama had negotiated, where he said, we're not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon, but we're just going to watch.
And they didn't have a nuclear weapon.
And where we're going to watch.
And they don't have a nuclear weapon.
And we're going to watch them enrich until they get close enough, and then we'll take military action. Europe, everyone was a party to this deal. This is not just a United States.
They still won't agree to not get a nuclear weapon.
This is not just a United States issue. As we saw during this conflict, where Iran, in their missile technology, sent a missile all the way to Diego Garcia. This was a wake-up call for Europe. They now have missile technology that can reach Europe.
Right.
This is a terrorist regime that we cannot allow to have a nuclear weapon.
So you said the president has been very clear here in his goals and intent. Our polling shows the American people aren't persuaded in the same way you are. Let me run through some of the things he said on the Hormuz Strait. At the outset of the war, March 3rd, he said the Navy would begin escorting tankers. No matter what, the U.S. will ensure the free flow of energy to the world. March 9th, he said he was still thinking about taking it over. March 15th, he said it was someone else's problem. Our allies would take care of it. Maybe we shouldn't even be there. We don't need it. We have a lot of oil. 6 days later, he threatened online the U.S. would attack Iran's power plants if it didn't open the strait within 48 hours. March 26th, he went back to blaming allies, saying he's disappointed in NATO.
Margaret, in any conflict,
and then
there's
he
going
announced
to be,
a 2-week ceasefire, saying Iran had agreed to open the strait. I'm not done, because yesterday he said that CENTCOM announced they're sending 2 ships to set the conditions for clearing mines. This morning, he said the Navy's going to start blockading the strait and interdict ships. Is that the final answer? I mean, can you see here why the public doesn't think that the president has a clear strategy?
Your adversary has a vote in this, too, and they have a position in it, too, which there were just negotiations yesterday.
They changed with the
days.
Just
yesterday, there were negotiations, and literally, Iran had an opportunity just yesterday to say to the world, we're not going to pursue a nuclear weapon. Can you imagine?
But
the
on the
largest
Strait of
exporter
Hormuz, which is the thing that's causing your gas prices to go up,
having a nuclear weapon, they have been enriching. They have been enriching uranium. They've been enriching to the point where the IAEA, the head of the IAEA, said they were weeks away from having enough to have a nuclear weapon.
There has not been a single congressional hearing on this issue. No one's disagreeing. It's an important one. Since this war began, you have been in session for 11 days, Congressman.
For decades.
Do you think this is adequate oversight?
There have been
of this war?
Decades of, well, actually, we have had classified briefings on this issue. Now, this is an ongoing conflict. There are going to be continued briefings. I think the administration certainly could, and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee has chastised the department on needing to provide Congress with more information, but we've had classified briefings. But the issue that's the crux of this, that Iran cannot be permitted to have a nuclear weapon, which is what the vice president stood before the world and said, that Iran is unwilling to declare just yesterday, which was the breaking point of the negotiations, has been the subject of hearings for decades.
Do you know what the president means when he says that the United States Navy is now going to be blockading the Strait of Hormuz that we are trying to open? Has that been briefed to Congress?
I think, well, of course not, because it was just announced yet, as you were discussing this morning. Well, if it was a clear strategy
all along, and this was part of the plan, you would think it happened.
What is clear in the strategy, as the president has said, is the straits are not just a United States issue. It is also a Europe issue. It is a worldwide issue. And Iran should not be permitted. Iran should not be permitted to control the straits. And it's not just a United States issue.
Did they mind it?
And Iran should not be permitted to just decide who gets through. And Europe, our NATO allies, others who have certainly an interest in the straits, should be coming to the table. And it should not just be a U.S. issue. The president, by saying, we're not just going to let them decide who gets through, is certainly calling all of our allies and everyone to the table of this needs to be addressed.
Did they mine the Strait of Hormuz? Because in that tweet today, the president also said they might not have.
Well, I think,
because he said no.
I think you'll have to ask the president.
But that's the point, that Congress has not been briefed on that. As a member on Oversight and Armed Services, do you feel like this has actually been adequately explained to you? Because the American public does not.
The president just tweeted this morning, so you'll have to ask the president.
We would love to ask the president or the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Defense.
Let's be precise about what just happened in that interview. Because the surface read is that Margaret Brennan humiliated Mike Turner. And she did. But humiliation is the byproduct. The actual story is something more structurally dangerous. And that is what we are here to talk about. What you watched was the complete collapse of congressional oversight, live, unedited, with a congressman who did not even realize he was confessing to it. Start with the Hormuz moment, because that is the one that should keep you up at night. Margaret Brennan asked Mike Turner a direct question. Did the United States Navy mine the Strait of Hormuz? Turner's answer, and I want you to hear this clearly, was, you'll have to ask the president. This man sits on the Armed Services Committee, the Oversight Committee, the committee that exists specifically so that the American military cannot conduct operations without civilian accountability. And he does not know if American forces mined one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz. Every disruption to that strait hits working people at the gas pump, at the grocery store, in their heating bills. And the congressman whose entire job is to know what is happening there told a journalist to ask someone else. That is not a gaffe. That is the system breaking down in public. And Turner smiled through most of it, which is somehow worse than if he had panicked. Now let's talk about the Iran nuclear timeline, because Turner kept using it as a shield, and Margaret Brennan dismantled it piece by piece. Turner's entire defense rested on one pillar. Iran was weeks away from having enough material for a nuclear weapon. The International Atomic Energy Agency said so. This justified the conflict. This justified everything. So Margaret did something radical. She read the administration's own record back to him. March 3rd, Trump said the Navy would escort tankers no matter what. March 9th, still thinking about it. March 15th, actually, it is someone else's problem. Maybe we should not even be there. March 21st, threatening to bomb Iranian power plants within 48 hours. March 26th, back to blaming NATO. That is not a strategy. That is one man's impulsive social media feed being reverse-engineered into foreign policy by congressmen who are too loyal or too scared to admit they have no idea what is actually happening. And when Turner could not reconcile any of it, he stopped trying. He just kept cycling back to the nuclear weapon talking point like a man driving the same 50 feet of road back and forth because he ran out of highway. That is what intellectual bankruptcy looks like in real time. Turner also said, almost casually, that no conflict ever polls well. That when you are in a conflict, nobody says it is being handled well. That is just the nature of war. That is a flat-out lie, and a provable one. Operation Desert Storm gave George H.W. Bush approval ratings north of 80% at its peak. The initial response to Afghanistan after September 11th had overwhelming public support. The reason those conflicts had public support, whatever you think of the decisions themselves, is because the administrations behind them made coherent arguments and held consistent positions. The reason this Iran conflict does not poll well is not because conflict is inherently unpopular. It is because the American public can see the contradictions. They can see a president whose position on the Strait of Hormuz changed 4 times in a single month, and they can see a congressman on the Armed Services Committee who cannot answer basic questions about it on national television. Turner's conflicts never poll well line is not an observation. It is a preemptive alibi designed to make the public's skepticism sound naive, when in reality their skepticism is the most rational response available to the information they are being given. Now let's name the ghost that was sitting at that table the entire time. Urgent weapons timelines, imminent threats, the necessity of military action before the window closes, congressional members who cannot explain the strategy but defend it anyway. We have seen this before. It ran for about 20 years, cost trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives, and hundreds of thousands of civilian lives across the region. And the people who sold it faced zero meaningful accountability. They wrote books. They went on speaking tours. Some became respected elder statesmen. I'm not saying the Iran nuclear threat is fabricated. I'm saying the credibility required to make that case, to ask the American people to trust another urgent military timeline, has to be earned, and it cannot be earned by an administration that contradicts itself 6 times in 3 weeks, while the Oversight Committee tells journalists to ask the president. The burden of proof is higher now, because we paid for that lesson in blood and treasure, and we are still paying the interest. Now here is the part that does not get enough attention, and it should. Congress has been in session 11 days since this conflict began. 11 days. Turner admitted on camera that the blockade tweet from that morning had not been briefed to Congress yet. He admitted the classified briefings have been limited. He admitted the chairman of the Armed Services Committee had to publicly chastise the Pentagon for keeping Congress in the dark during an active military conflict. The chairman had to scold the Pentagon publicly during wartime. That is not normal. The entire architecture of civilian oversight exists precisely so that one administration cannot unilaterally conduct military operations without accountability to the people paying for it and the people dying in it. When Turner says, "You'll have to ask the president," he's not just dodging a question. He's describing a government operating outside its own oversight mechanisms, in real time, on national television. And he seems more annoyed that someone noticed than alarmed that it is happening. That annoyance is the tell. Accountability is supposed to be uncomfortable for the people being held accountable. The moment a congressman treats tough questions like an imposition, the oversight function is already gone. Here is where we land. The working-class Americans who are going to feel this conflict in their gas prices, their grocery bills, their kids potentially getting deployment orders. They deserve a government that can answer basic questions about what it is doing and why. They deserve representatives whose loyalty runs to the people who elected them, not to a president whose strategy changes with his next post. And here is the context that makes this even worse. Mike Turner is considered one of the more moderate Republicans in the House. This was not a MAGA firebrand. This was a supposedly serious member of the Oversight Committee, crumbling under straightforward journalism. If the moderate ones cannot answer the questions, nobody in that caucus can. And if nobody in that caucus can, then nobody is doing the oversight. And if nobody is doing the oversight, then we are funding a military conflict with working-class tax dollars and working-class lives, with zero accountability from the branch of government constitutionally required to provide it. Margaret Brennan did her job. Turner refused to do his. And the gap between those two things, that is where the real danger lives. Share this. Put it in front of someone who still thinks Congress is watching. Subscribe to Miller's Mandate, because we are going to keep pulling on this thread until something comes loose. I am Silas Miller. Oversight is not optional, and neither is this conversation.